you're sending up to 40 members of the Arkansas National Guard down to the Texas border. Is it fair to say that this is more of a political gesture than actually helping the situation?
No, I disagree with that completely. And what they've given to us on the border is a political nightmare. And so it deserves a cooperative response between the states and the federal government. What's happening right now is disaster. It's a human tragedy, what we're seeing with the change in policy coming out of the Biden administration.
That's Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson addressing that he is one of several Republican governors who now answered Texas Governor Greg Abbott's call to help, to send law enforcement to help enforce the southern border. Let's bring in now Arkansas GOP Senator Tom Cotton. Senator, thank you so much for being here. I would love to ask you about this. We've seen Florida answer the call, now Arkansas answer the call, and South Dakota answer the call. South Dakota is an interesting case because Governor Kristi Noem has helped fund the state police that are going to the southern border here through a private donation. A billionaire from Tennessee has donated the money to support law enforcement from South Dakota going to Texas. And that brings up some interesting conundrums that Hutchinson, by the way, was asked about in that interview. Is it appropriate? Is it the right use? And I ask this in all curiosity. Is that good precedent? Is that bad precedent for a governor to use private donations to fund law enforcement being dedicated for this purpose?
Well, Will, I think that's really a question of state law, and each state may vary on how they support their National Guard when they're mobilized. What I think is a real shame, though, is that any governor needs to send National Guard troops to the border at the request of the Texas governor. And it all goes back to Joe Biden's failed border policies. Look, Texas and New Mexico and Arizona and California may be the literal border states, but Joe Biden has brought the crisis of the border to all 50 states. I was in South Dakota just last week. I heard from many South Dakotans who are worried about the drugs flowing into their communities, about the threat of illegal alien crime. We're worried about that in Arkansas as well. If Joe Biden would simply continue construction of the border wall rather than paying these contractors not to work, and if he would stop the flow of migrants, now hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens pouring into our country over the last 6 months, then the Texas governor wouldn't have had to put out this urgent call to support from other governors from around the country.
Yeah, so true. I want to switch to this. Captain America on how America is built on lies. You got to hear this. Here's the quote. Here's the thing about a dream, though. A dream isn't real. I'm starting to think America actually has two dreams and one lie. The first American dream is the one that isn't real. It's some people expect just to be handed to them, and then they get angry when it disappears. When the truth is, it never really existed in the first place. It doesn't get along nicely with reality. Other culture immigrants. The poor, we're at our best when we keep no one out. A good dream is shared radically, shared with everyone. When something isn't shared, I can become the American lie. I think this is such terrible rhetoric. I mean, it is true that we didn't live up to our documents, but the documents weren't flawed. It was the human beings, right?
Yeah. I mean, Lawrence, it sounds like Captain America may need a demotion to lieutenant after that speech. But this is what happens when you allow left-wing activists to write your comic books. Yeah. And it reflects a kind of march through our cultural institutions, comic books, schools, and indoctrinating our kids to believe that kind of nonsense. Over the weekend, you saw the New York Times running a long story about how the flag, for goodness sake, is now a divisive symbol for many Americans. Look, we should be proud of our heritage and our founding principles. 245 years ago this weekend, our founding fathers declared our independence, not just because of local grievances over taxes or the quartering of soldiers, but because they wanted to found a new republic dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal, as Abraham Lincoln said at the Gettysburg Address. Now, we haven't always achieved that in practice, but our history has been one of continually struggling to realize those ideals. That's exactly what Dr. Martin Luther King said in his I Have a Dream speech, in which he explicitly and repeatedly invoked the Declaration and said that our work is the full realization of America's founding principles. We should teach our children, whether it's in the schools or in our movies and television, or yes, our comic books, to be proud of and celebrate America's traditions.
Right. I mean, the irony, he's Captain America, right, Senator? And I think you're spot on when you talk about this is the latest thing that they're taking over. And it's also self-serving, because if the American dream is dead, if it's rigged, guess what? We need big government. We need Democrats. So you're spot on there, Senator. Thanks so much for joining us today. We always appreciate your insight.
Thanks, Senator.